Today we have Chloe Mascord on the podcast. Welcome, Chloe.
Hello. Thank you so much for having me. I'm so glad we made it.
Welcome. Oh my goodness, everyone. We've had some tech issues this morning, but lucky Chloe is young and knows what she's doing. I'm over 40. It's too late for me.
Stop lying to the audience. It's not true. I'm definitely not good with the tech.
Let me introduce you so everyone knows how fabulous you are. So Chloe is an internationally certified intimacy educator and somatic sex coach. And after this, actually, I'll get you to tell people what that means because some people might not know what somatic is, and I think it's important. She's the founder of Honey ED and is also the host of Honey ED Intimacy Made Easy podcast, which provides bite-sized sex and intimacy tips for the time-poor women. Amazing. I'm so excited that we're having this interview. When we had our pre-chat, we gelled so well. So it's really cool to have brought this podcast to life. Tell me what it means. Like, what does your title mean that you do?
Yeah, absolutely. So when we're talking about like a somatic sex and intimacy coach, it's like when we blend talking with practical tools. So like mindfulness and education and just, I guess, all the elements of connecting back with the body and how we can incorporate everything all together in the space of sex coaching. So it's mind, body, spirituality, all of that together.
Amazing. And you can see why that's so important for this particular thing. I mean, it's so important for everyone to be connected to their body, but particularly in intimacy, right?
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah, amazing. When we spoke on the pre-podcast interview, you said something to me around making conversations around sex sexy. So I'd love to start there because I don't know what you find, but I find in Australia a lot of people are quite uncomfortable talking about sex. And so I would love you to talk about how women can make these conversations fun and sexy and not heavy.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's important for us to acknowledge that sex is still a very taboo topic. And I think that's worldwide. I actually just got off another podcast today with a guy who's in Nashville. And it's still a very taboo conversation on the other side of the world as well. I think definitely in Australia more so, but in comparison to places like Europe, obviously in Europe, there's a lot more openness about it. But yeah, it's a very taboo topic still. And I think we need to acknowledge that when we were growing up, we never really got taught how to have healthy communication in general, really. Like that's just not something that we sit down with our parents and they say, you know, this is how you talk to people in a respectful way in a relationship. And then you add that layer in of sex, which is taboo and uncomfortable for most people. And you're kind of in this position where, you know, you're trying to have a conversation about something that you already feel maybe a level of shame or discomfort around. So when we tie that back in with consent, also I feel like that's a new space that we've only just really sort of dabbled our feet into since, you know, violence against women has come through. It's become more and more important for us to practice consent so that we can reduce traumatic experiences for people, male or female. So when we're talking about consent being sexy, this is a journey that I've personally been on as well. It's been really interesting. I'm in a relatively new relationship and I had to practice what I preach, which is always fun, in the beginning of this particular situation. And, you know, I think the first initial feeling around consent is it's so serious, you know, it feels like quite heavy and it's like I have to ask for permission. And then it takes that, you know, that excitement that we have in the moment of being intimate, in particular with a new partner, away. But that's a myth. That's not something that's true. We can definitely create some sexiness when it comes to consent. I think, you know, for example, when we're talking about how that actually looks, like what would a sexy consent example be? So for example, that might be something like, I love it when you do this, or do you like it when I do this? I think that's a way to keep it quite affirmative. It's also an opportunity to share with your partner what it is that you enjoy and brings you pleasure. So if Yeah. And I think if we're talking about consent, I think by practicing consent in a day-to-day life, and when it's not just about sex, when we take it back and it's like maybe just interactions with that person as a beginning point,
Mhm.
that might be, do you mind if I hold your hand? That's so simple. And it's also an opportunity to ask somebody rather than assume. So it's
Mm,
like, do you mind if I hold your hand? And it's like, oh, yeah, sure, of course. But we're not assuming, we're actually
mm,
asking for permission to be in that person's personal space.
mm,
So I think the more that we start to do it outside of the bedroom,
mm,
in particular with that new partner, the more that it becomes the norm in the relationship. So it's like, it can also be like, oh, do you like it when I kiss you on the cheek, or does it feel good for you when I kiss you on the cheek? Or you're being curious. And I think
mm.
when we approach it with this curiosity and intrigue and desire to understand that person on a deeper level, it has much more positive connotation to it.
Yeah. I love that so much. If we're thinking about like women when they first start dating someone and sex becomes on the table, or they find themselves at someone's house after a night out, like how can they feel comfortable to talk about what they're comfortable with or not comfortable with?
Yeah. So I think often it starts before we even get to the house. I think it
Mm,
starts now that we're doing online dating. I think in my experience is that a lot of the time, if we're talking about a heterosexual relationship, men want to know where their boundaries are. They want to know what they can and can't do and can and can't say.
mm,
So I think I've noticed that there'll be a little bit of boundary testing before it gets to the point sometimes of meeting up in person if we're talking about online dating or being set up or something like that. So texting or whatever it is. So what I've experienced and what clients have also experienced is when there starts to be a sexual innuendo to a conversation. So
mhm,
that might be where somebody says, oh, referring to being intimate, or
mhm,
kind of like slips it into a conversation to kind of test the waters.
mhm.
And so a response that this is word for word what I've responded to somebody with. I pulled this little piece of information from my previous texting. So my response to somebody who was kind of skating along the line was, acknowledging most of us have sexual sides, but on
Mhm,
different scales. And
mhm,
personally, I find it really attractive when people own that part of themselves for sure. But what's even sexier about that is when people communicate it in a respectful way. And I think that there's a time and a place for that.
uh-huh.
And so that then allows the person to see that, okay, I'm stepping along that boundary. And you can get a pretty good gauge on somebody just by the response that you get from something like
Uh-huh.
that. They'll either go, oh, I forget I've said anything, which is not
Mhm,
necessarily a mature approach, or they'll go, yep, fair enough. Or
mhm.
they'll be curious and ask more questions.
Yeah.
So I
Or they'll
think
say, don't be ridiculous, like, and make fun of you, like if they're not respecting your
I'm such a
boundaries.
prude.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
and then you go, and do you know what? This is why these somewhat uncomfortable conversations, or yeah, somewhat uncomfortable conversations actually are going to give you some pretty big indicators of whether or not this person is worth pursuing.
Yeah. So what was your response? Did I miss it?
So
What did you
that
say?
was so the initial message I got prior to that was just referring to after being intimate with somebody, saying that, I love to cuddle after being intimate or being
Yep.
physical, and I have a sexual side. Sorry, that sometimes slips out. And
Uh-huh.
I was like, interesting. Okay. So I could tell that was almost like, I want to be cheeky and I just want to see if it's going to be reciprocated.
Mhm.
I am enjoying talking to you and I just maybe want to take it further. So I was getting that bit of a vibe from that. And then my response was what I just mentioned before about acknowledging
Yeah.
that that person has a sexual side, and saying that I find it attractive when you own that part of yourself. There's no shame, because I think that's important too. We don't want to make people feel shameful for being sexual, but there was a time and a place and it was not then.
Yeah.
Um, and we hadn't met yet. And I was like, like,
Yeah.
it's not, I mean, I know I get it probably more because of my line of work. People think,
I
oh,
bet.
yeah, shit, I can talk to her about anything. And I'm like, actually no.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think that's a really cool opportunity to just softly approach a boundary. And even, another example of that is this could be done in person, is like, I'm comfortable with kissing, but I'm not ready to go any further tonight. How do you feel? You're kind of like setting a standard where you're going, this is my line. And then you're giving the other person an opportunity to respond back and tell you how they feel as well, so that you're not just going,
Yeah.
oh no, and shutting it down. And then
Yeah.
you're creating a question back for them.
Yeah. I think that's so important what you just said. I literally just had a client the other day who they'd seen each other once and had a really good date. And then the next couple of messages were, what time does your kid go to bed? And she was thinking, great, he's going to call me. He wants to give me a call and chat. And then he said, can you send me a nude? And she's like, oh, we're not there. Like, why did you take her instant thing was like, why did you take it there? We're so not there. And, but thankfully she said to him, like, he did not respond well, but so that showed her everything.
Perfect.
However, it was a bit like, we're not there yet. That was her response. I'm not comfortable with doing that. But maybe he didn't know, right? In fairness, like, people throw stuff out of the time. It's like when someone first says, I love you, they don't know if the other person's going to say it back. Someone has to take a risk at some
vulnerability.
point. And yeah, exactly. And it's okay to then say, you're not ready. It's not right timing, et cetera, et cetera. Yeah.
I think it's really important as well to acknowledge, this is one that gets missed a lot, is you're allowed to have intimacy with somebody and then just decide to slow down.
Yes.
It's you're not then all of a sudden expected, okay, well, we've had a level of intimacy, whatever that be, kissing, it might be intercourse, it might be anything. But just because you've done that once, or you've started to open that opportunity for intimacy, does not mean that you can't slow things down. And a way to communicate that with somebody might be like, I really enjoyed, having sex with you. I also really like warming up to it. And in the future, that might be something that we can try a little bit slower. As much as I really am attracted to you and I want to try all of it, I really don't think that there's any need for us to rush.
Beautiful. I love these specific examples that you're giving, because it gives, clients the language to be able to use in those situations, which is so important.
Yeah. I think we're not taught it. That's why I bring a lot of scripts into the work with clients that I do, is because, it's all well and good for us to talk conceptually about situations and communication in relationships. But I think where a lot of people are lost is that they just simply don't know how to have the conversation, because there's no examples of it really out there in the world.
I agree. And I think you frame that really well in terms of like, let someone say something. And if you're not provided it's not abusive or, majorly red flaggy, it's okay for you to then put a boundary back in place and see how they respond to that, because everyone has different ideas around what is okay and not okay. And someone else might respond to be like, sure, I want to send you a nude, like to someone else they might be really there and ready for that, easy to misread those situations.
I just wanted to add as well, in my experience with, really being clear about setting a boundary, it actually was a beautiful catalyst for connection. And I found that when I shared and verbalized my boundary with somebody, I'm now with somebody now that I had to do that with. And what happened was I fell into a trap of judgment really quickly. And I understand why we do it. I get why we do it, because often we're spot on when we make a call on somebody, because, as women, we're very intuitive. But sometimes that can be incorrect. And sometimes when we put people into a box and we assume we know what their intentions are, we can be wrong. And I think when we give somebody the opportunity to change the direction, or to either respect your boundary or not, they may have never had a woman turn around and say to them before, I don't feel comfortable when you say that to me, or that doesn't feel very nice, or we're not there yet, or something like that. And in my case, I verbalized that was not comfortable for me and that it felt disrespectful. And that person turned around and was like, you know what, you're right. I overstepped the mark. I got a little bit carried away. Noted. And then that was it. It didn't happen again. You know what I mean? Like it's not always the case in your client's case. Well,
Yeah, but then it showed her not to be with him, right? Like
correct.
that's so easy. Like you get, like I always say to clients, like set boundaries early on, like literally as early on as like your first conversation with them, you can set a boundary for something you're not okay with, because the response to that will give you all the information you need. And then
Yeah.
you don't need to go on a date with them if you find they're already overstepping your boundary in the chat that
Waste
you're
of
having.
time.
Yeah.
Do you
So
know the other
important.
beautiful part about this is as well that I noticed within myself was I actually formed a deeper connection with myself, and I felt really good. I felt really
Yeah.
good. I felt really good about going, no, I'm not okay with that. And I felt like not only was I respectful to myself, but he respected me more.
Mm,
Not because I wasn't willing to do the sexual stuff. Don't get me wrong. Like that's a part of, on different levels for everyone. And I found very attractive. And I was like, yeah, you're hot, whatever. And there's connection and there's value alignment. There's all the things that make me want to have intimacy with you. But for me, it created respect from a potential relational perspective, but also within myself.
yes. That's huge. Having that boundary with yourself as well.
Yeah. I felt
Yeah.
really good about it. I was like, see that? Great. And if he had gone the other way, I would have gone, oh, thank God I didn't waste my time.
Yeah. Yeah. It's so important. Oh, I hope everyone hears this. So, so, so important. Let's jump into like around your story around like body confidence, like low libido, all of that stuff. Are you comfortable going there?
Yeah,
Look
absolutely.
at that. I ask consent, everyone. Do you see? Do you
Thank
hear that?
you. Yeah, it's a yes from me. It's a hell yes from me. Love that. I love it. Yeah, look, when we're talking about, sexual confidence and then, which I mean, we could talk about both directions, because sexual confidence is one thing and then low libido is another. In my case, anyway, sometimes they're
Yeah.
intertwined. But
Yeah.
in my case, my low libido that I experienced was in my previous relationship from this one, which was, a couple of years long, and it was an engagement. And that particular relationship, that was the first time I'd ever experienced low libido. And when it started to happen in the relationship, I went to immediately what's wrong with me. And I started thinking there was something wrong with my body. It wasn't functioning properly, that there was something I needed to fix, something I needed to do in order to make my libido come back. And in my case, and often it's stress, and that stress can be caused from multiple different avenues. For me, my stress was the stress of unresolved conflict in the relationship, and also stress from being in a very toxic relationship. So that was creating quite a lot of stress in my life because there was certain things that were quite unpredictable and uneasy. And so that level of stress and my nervous system running on high was killing my libido. And it was really interesting because I didn't really want to admit that I had low libido, because at the time I was working as a sex coach, and I was like, oh, this is, not in alignment with my brand.
Yeah.
But you know what? Maybe I had to go through it in order to support other women. Absolutely. But, it can be stress. It can be unresolved relationship conflicts. It can be a detachment from the body, which was also what I was experiencing. Was I wasn't connected to my heart. I wasn't connected to my body. It can be a whole range of different things. It can also be lack of confidence in your physical appearance as well. That's a real quick way to switch that libido off. If you don't feel good in your body, or you're having, it's even from one day to the next with our cycle. Even I experience this. I don't feel like I want intimacy all the time anyway. There'll be like a particular week of my cycle where I'm like, oh, I couldn't, it doesn't come across my mind where I'm really that driven to have sex or intimacy. But I think when it's that consistently lack of desire to have intimacy is when we would start to look at it being low libido. But the good thing about all of that was, in hindsight as well, was I got to experience firsthand where my head went when I was experiencing that low libido. And as women, we always I don't want to say always, we often blame ourselves. And that's the first place that my head went, was what's wrong with me? It wasn't what's not working in the relationship, or what's that person doing that's actually having an impact on our intimacy.
Yeah.
It's a nice reminder to not always go to you being the problem. Like, maybe zoom out and look at the whole situation and
So
consider
how
all
did you
the
do
different
that?
factors.
Like, how did you go from being like in the weeds of being like, it is my problem, to then having this awareness around, oh, this is what's actually happening?
Good question. I think because I was feeling, because I know when I'm in alignment, and this is the other thing that ties back to, is when you know your body and you know when you're feeling good and you have a connection with your body, you very quickly know when you're out of alignment. And because I was stressed, and because I was feeling discomfort in my body, I knew something wasn't right. And so then when I was able to zoom out, I was like, okay, well, why am I not feeling comfortable to just relax? And I knew that we were having conflict in the relationship, and I knew that things weren't getting resolved. And I knew that, there was resentment towards him, and there was things that I was just like, the last thing in the world I want to do is to be intimate with him. And in certain situations, you can come back from that, as long as it's not, and I want to be really careful where I go with this, but as long as it's not a really toxic situation, because I think it skates over the line in my case where it was a little bit manipulative. And so as much as I, in the moment, wanted to resolve the issue and the challenges that I was having in the relationship, in hindsight, my body was sending me a message that it was not the right relationship for me. And that in fact, in my case, the libido was a really good thing, because I don't cope very well with not having intimacy in a relationship. It's a massive head fuck for me. Am I allowed to swear?
Yeah. Dad, you didn't ask consent. So rude.
Bleep me. Oh, yeah, sorry. I'm not even listening to my own advice, am I? Wow. Okay. Yes.
I love
consent
that.
after the fact doesn't really count, does it? Not at all. No. Jesus.
Ask for forgiveness. It's fine.
Oh, that's like my worst. Ask for forgiveness, not permission.
Yeah.
Jesus. Okay. So yeah, look, I realized it just was not healthy. It was not the right relationship for me. My body was sending me a message. The message was, get out. This is not serving you. This is it's aggravating this stress. It's aggravating your nervous system. And I just got to a point where I went, I can't continue being in a stressful dynamic. And there's really not a lot of positive things that are coming from this situation. We don't have, for a period there, we didn't have much intimacy. And even then, it was not a fulfilling type of intimacy that I could really relax into and enjoy and have pleasure from. So it actually fast tracked the decision for me to go, yeah, this really isn't something that I think is going to work. So it was a good thing. It was, I look at that experience of low libido as being highlighting that it was not the right relationship for me. As it's often looked at as a negative thing, but in my case, I'm like grateful that it happened.
Yeah. You just reminded me of like how important it is for the feminine to feel safe sexually, to be able to relax into that, to then be able to enjoy sex, so even just having that held for you is important.
How it directly correlates, and this is, some people don't struggle to have, there's the term make-up sex, like they can go from having conflict to then having intimacy and connection. But a lot of the time, especially as we get a little bit older, we absolutely need to have connection first before we can then be intimate. The space needs to be safe. The shit needs to be sorted. We need to be, the to-do list needs to be ticked off before we can actually drop into that space and go, okay, now I really want to be intimate with this person, because my mind isn't elsewhere. My mind isn't thinking about the disagreement. My mind isn't thinking about doing all the chores. Then I can relax in my body.
Yeah, I love that. How old were you when that relationship ended, if you don't mind me asking?
Well, yeah, this was 36, just 37. So like last year.
That's that would have been difficult, I can imagine.
Mm.
Like around the age where I'm guessing you were thinking about having children with this person because you're engaged and
Yep.
I know you want children. So, like, did that influence your decision to stay or go, or like, yeah, talk to me about that.
Yeah, so interesting you bring that up. Bear with me for a moment because you've hit the nail on the head there, because the one reason why I realized when I exited that relationship, the one reason why I stayed in that relationship for so long
Mm,
was because I wanted kids. And I thought
mm,
that was my only shot. And I thought
mm,
that if I left, somehow that story had played out in my mind that it wouldn't happen for me. I didn't
mm,
know at the time that's what was going on,
mm,
but I realized very quickly after that ending that that was the reason why I put up with that. I put
mm,
up with a lot of things that I now in hindsight would set boundaries around. So, yeah, I think it was it was a very interesting chapter post that relationship and even going into a new relationship, because that partner was 12 years older than me. So
mm.
he had two kids and I was doing stepmom life.
Yeah, wow.
So it was really interesting because, I really wanted my own kids, and that was what he'd said was in the cards. And then I left, we left that relationship. And then, my focus naturally as a woman of that age was family. Like, how can I have a family? What does that actually look like? And I,
Mm,
wanted to be open-minded about all the options that you have at that point, which is, do I want to freeze my eggs? Is it too
mhm.
late? You know, do I want to date for a bit? Do I want to meet somebody? Or, what is it? Where do I go from here? Because I had to constantly come back to my age being a factor in all of it.
Yeah.
Um, and that was a really difficult period because I'd met the person I'm with now quite soon after that relationship ended, like maybe a month.
Mhm.
He slid into the DMs as you apparently you do. I was
That's
like,
what
oh,
young people do.
I know, and he is young, and that
There you
was
go.
that was it. I was like, he slid into the DMs, and I went, "Is this a stitch up? Like, what's going on? Why?" And he came in like literally a few days after me deleting pictures of my ex, and I was in the headspace where I thought something was sus, and I didn't know what was going on. So
Mhm,
anyway, I immediately put him into a category of being potentially just a rebound or somebody that I could maybe just date, and that would be
mhm,
it. And I think this is where bringing it back to what you do is it's so important that we don't judge people and that we don't
mm.
assume based on age, because that's obviously a factor in what
Yes.
we're talking about right now.
Yeah.
My ex was 12 years older and this person's 8 years younger. That's a
Yeah.
20-year age difference. And I don't like comparing, but the person I'm with now has a lot more emotional capacity for
Yeah.
me than my previous partner had for me.
Yeah.
Um, and so I put him in a category, and I put him in a box, and I thought that he was that person. And then because I didn't allow myself to drop into that space of curiosity and seeing whether or not that was an option viable for me, I kind of pushed that to the side and said, look, as lovely as this was, I don't see this really being a serious thing. And then there was a part where we were, not seeing each other for a while there. And then what came out after that, because, I learned my own lesson about communication, that we hadn't actually had that conversation about what he
Mm.
wanted in his future. Did he want kids? Did he want all these things? I just assumed. And
Assumed. Yeah.
and then when we sat down and had that conversation, I was like, oh shit. He wants that. And then I went, oh no, he's 8 years younger. There's no way. He's not going to be ready. He's not going to want these things. And I started to take myself on quite a spiral. So I was
Yeah. See
like,
the stories we tell ourselves, they can be
oh,
so dangerous. Like you just make up this whole thing about him in your head that like
yeah,
he's not even had the chance to confirm or deny.
yeah. I was
Yeah.
like, he's seen 50 other chicks. And I was like, Chloe, what? You don't have evidence. That's I mean, you've just decided because he's a younger guy and he's, you find him attractive. that he's immediately not capable of having a serious relationship, like that's bullshit. So I really stress tested that in the beginning, and I think more so because of the age gap. And I think it's a fine line. I think I probably pushed it a little bit too hard, but I think it worked out okay. But I really wanted to make sure that that he wasn't scared off, because I think that was my biggest fear was, he's a bit younger. He might be afraid of even having a conversation about having kids. So,
yeah. And to be fair, you had just come out of a relationship that was toxic for you. And so like there is that, maybe you weren't aware of that, but you are testing him to go like, are you going to hang in there?
100%.
Yeah.
I still, even now, it's baby steps of trust. And I think, I used to just hand over my trust to somebody willy-nilly. And now I'm like, no, trust is earned. It takes time. And there needs to be consistency in order to feel that full trust. And I don't mean in a cheating way. I mean, trust is in trust that you are consistent, that you do what you say you will do, that you show up in a way that you not only speak, but you also act in the way that you
integrity.
Yeah, integrity. Absolutely. There you go. That's the word. And so what I ended up doing was I had a few conversations with a couple of girlfriends about, okay, so how do I combat my age, wanting to still have fun in a relationship, being early days and not overthinking, because I'm a serial overthinker. So I was like, okay, so I ended up going and getting all my levels tested, because I was like, just having the data feels a little bit better for me. And I thought initially, God, is that going to make me go one way or the other? Am I going to then, if I have the information and it's not good information, am I then going to go, oh shit, that creates more stress? But I think it was more just when I have the information, then I just can process it and there's no rush. And when I got the data back, I was like pretty happy, and content with that. And I was able to relax a little bit and come back to myself and my body and trusting, because I'm quite a spiritual person. And I feel that when I'm not in my head and I'm in my body, what is meant for me will be. And if that is kids, which I hope it is, and I'll put all the vibes out there and I'll be realistic in my timelines, then great. And if it's not, then there's a way to find acceptance for that too. And that's not the case for everyone, but for me, that was my way of just accepting where I was at and trying to be more in the present with this person who I wanted to create a connection with first before we even thought about bringing kids into the picture.
Yeah. That's so beautiful. I don't know if everyone knows this. You probably don't know this, but it took us like 5 years to have our little boy, who's now 4. And so I had him when I was 36, because I'm 40 now, and he was IVF. But we had to get to the point where we had these conversations around like, what happens if we can't fall pregnant? Do you want to leave the relationship? We'd been together since we were like 17, so a very long time. But I had to have a really honest conversation of like, if we can't have kids, do we stay together? Because I don't want to take that dream from you, and he didn't want to take that dream from me. And so like also had to surrender to that fact of like, it might not happen and we'll be okay. And I say that like it happened so freaking easy. Of course it didn't happen easy. Of course, there's still a huge want to have a kid there. But now that I have a 4-year-old, I'm like, that was always going to happen. Like it was just so obvious, because I also felt that in my gut. But yeah, we had to get to the point of surrender as well.
Yeah, that's so, yeah, I love hearing you be vulnerable as well and sharing your story. And I can feel it. It's just, it pulls on the heartstrings when you just feel in your future and in your destiny that you're meant to have kids. And then you're like, shit, what happens if I can't? Or what happens if what I want isn't the outcome that I get? And I find myself even now, I've got to be honest and say, I get a little bit in the future, and I find that comes from a need to control the life that I want to lead. And I find myself when I slip into that future space, I'm like, I want to control, when, giving myself the best chance to have a child. But it's like, but hang on, come back. And so it's like now it's about having that awareness of going, because it's a biological feeling too. So I wake up and I, walk down the river and I see kids and I'm like, oh, that feeling in my body is like, okay, calm down. So it's like a daily reminder that my body is at that point where it's like wanting children, but having the awareness that that's what's going on and it's okay, and using that love and space in your heart to go within is only going to set you up to be an even better mother should that time come when you do have a child in the world. And using that motherly love to parent your inner child has been something that I've been using my energy towards.
Yeah,
Which has been
beautiful.
great.
Beautiful. And I just want to commend you for like having the courage to leave that relationship and enter into the unknown, because like, can you imagine having a child with that man now that you are there where you are now? No.
Yeah. It's just.
No. Yeah. So well done. I think you're incredibly brave, because that's not easy. Like, I hear people say that all the time. Like, I work with couples where they're together like this, and, it's really tricky. And especially most of my clients at this age, they're like, 35 to 40 wanting to have kids, dating. And there's this pressure and speed that it puts on dating that you don't have when you're younger, because there is more fun about it. And there isn't, like, you can't hide that pressure. Like, it exists.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And I'm in this dynamic now where, and I love this because it just gives me the opportunity to learn more and more about myself. But I'm in this dynamic now where I'm navigating, this need and want to have children and be in a new relationship. And the biggest thing for me now is letting my guard down a little bit to allow this person to allow myself to trust somebody that deserves to be trusted. And that's a daily thing for me, where I have to really check in and, am I keeping my walls up, or am I, in alignment with what I want? Am I protecting myself? And so there's a few different multi-layered things going on at the same time. And I think this is the thing about this particular age when we are dating, is there's a lot to consider and a lot to really be aware of within ourselves, that if we accept the why we're wanting to know if this is the right person so early on, and we want to, we're kind of over dating because we just want the answers to the future, and when are we going to have kids? Are we going to have kids? So that we can start to compartmentalize it. But I need to be constantly reminded from myself to just have fun and to enjoy the moment. Because that's all we can do. Like, me trying to control the future and trying to live in the future is actually taking me away from enjoying the experience in the moment.
Yeah. Yeah. And it doesn't, like, it's not magically doing anything, by like you thinking it's about the future. It's not like this is actually going to, definitely, I completely get that.
Yeah,
amazing.
sure.
I have so many things that I want to ask you. I feel like we need to do a second interview. But I think what's really clear about, what you've spoken about, like the thread for me throughout all of this is for people to become really aware of what things feel like in their body, because that just governs so many things, so many decisions, so many, like, knowing if you're in alignment, knowing if someone's crossed a boundary, knowing if you need to set a boundary, knowing if you're comfortable doing something, knowing if you're in the right space. Like, I just think for me, it's such a shortcut to know when something is off or right for you. So love that. Maybe you can come back and talk just about that.
Love to. Absolutely. For sure.
Thank you so much. This has been so beautiful. Thank you for sharing so vulnerably and open from your heart, because I know this will resonate with so many women out there. So I'm super grateful for you to do that.
Thank you for your vulnerability too. I think that will be very powerful, especially for the listeners that are constantly tuning in to hear your experiences as well. Is really powerful, because when it comes to getting pregnant and having children and all of those things, I think it's not spoken about as much as what it could be. So your bravery is also noticed as well. And I appreciate you getting to the vulnerability place and joining me there. As difficult as it is sometimes.
Thank you. I mean, I widely publicized that I did IVF because I wanted everyone to know that that's what,
Mm.
like, there was no, I mean, and look, I'm super grateful. Our IVF journey was ridiculously easy. Like, he was our first fresh implant, like, that went six. It was so easy. Like, it was textbook easy. So I'm super grateful for that. And I know that's not everyone's experience, but I was so grateful even doing IVF because I said to one of my friends, I was like, you get to see him on the screen as like a blastocyst, which is like a 5-day embryo. Like, if you fall pregnant naturally, you don't get to see that. I got to see my baby as like little bowl of cells before he got implanted in my uterus. How cool is that?
I love that. I love you painting that in a grateful, light as well. And, saying that you're really appreciative that it was smooth sailing for you.
Yeah. Yeah.
With that.
Anyway, tell everyone how they can find you, how they can work with you, how they can be in your orbit.
Absolutely. So if you'd like to have a little bit more of a look at the content I share and get to know me a little bit better, the best platform is Instagram at thehoneyed.official. And if you'd like to slide into my DMs, just like my current partner did, then I'd be more than happy to chat and just listen to any questions that you have, or if you want to share your thoughts on this podcast, I would love to hear some more info. And then my website is www.honey-ed.com, and my services and a little bit more about me you'll find on there as well. But by all means, reach out and have a chat. I'm always up to connecting with as many women as I possibly can.
Amazing. And all of that will be in the show notes. So no one had to have listened to anything you said, and they can just go there and look at it.
Perfect.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, lovely.